Among all the meditation techniques that came from ancient India, two of them seem to be especially misunderstood and misrepresented in these modern times. Those practices are Kundalini Yoga and Gopi Bhava. I published a video on YouTube that documented my experiment with Kundalini Yoga, and to my great surprise, it got many, many views. Its popularity might have been, in part, due to my approach, my point of view as an objective outsider. As you might know, I'm primarily a practitioner and teacher of Advaita Vedanta. So, my perspective on Kundalini Yoga was like that of a tourist in a foreign country, like a newly arrived visitor who studies the local history and culture and then gets immersed in the lifestyle there, living with its townsfolk and taking part in the same activities as they do. Now, I'd like to share with you another outsider's perspective about the practice of Gopi Bhava. This discussion will expand on my previous video about the Padma Purana story describing Arjuna's transformation into a gopi. If you haven't seen it yet, you might find it helpful to watch that video first and then return to this one. You can find a link below. Gopi Bhava is one of the many meditation techniques that are used to cultivate bhakti, devotion. Along with meditation, other practices like prayer, chanting, singing, and puja, or ritual worship, are used to cultivate reverence and love for God, Ishvara. Gopi Bhava is focused specifically on Ishvara in the form of Lord Krishna. Many devotees of Lord Krishna considered him to be not merely an avatar of Lord Vishnu, but the one supreme God of the universe. Gopi Bhava literally means the bhava, or devotional feelings, of the gopis, the milkmaids with whom Lord Krishna lived as a young cowherd while growing up in Vrindavan. Gopi Bhava is one of several types of devotional feelings that are depicted in the scriptures, along with shanta bhava, the feeling of utter contentment you have in the presence of Lord Krishna, and sakhya bhava, feeling like Lord Krishna is your dearest friend and your lifelong companion, and dasya bhava, feeling like you are Lord Krishna's most devoted servant and he is your loving master. Among these different kinds of devotional feelings, the bhava that's considered highest or most powerful is madhura bhava, or Madhurya bhava. Madhurya literally means sweetness. So Madhurya bhava is the sweet feeling of being attracted to Lord Krishna that the gopis felt so intensely. In different scriptures, it's also called Gopi Bhava, Sakhi Bhava, and Manjari Bhava. Now, the practice of Gopi Bhava is best known for its important role in the tradition of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which is a devotional sect that was founded by the great saint Chaitanya, who was born in Bengal about 500 years ago. A unique aspect of this tradition is that it directs followers, both male and female, to adopt a distinctly female attitude towards Lord Krishna, like that of the gopis. Why? Well, according to the Bhagavata Purana and other scriptures, the gopis' devotion to Lord Krishna was the highest of all. Their love was unsurpassable, both in purity and intensity. So, the gopis are the best possible role model for those who want to cultivate Krishna bhakti. There's also a strong psychological basis for the practice of Gopi Bhava. The soft, tender, loving emotions felt by most women are generally considered to be stronger than those felt by most men. Often, men who are in touch with their so-called feminine sides seem to be more gentle, warm, and loving than other men. In this way, to feel strongly attracted to Lord Krishna might be much easier for a man who is in touch with his inner gopi, so to speak. But Gopi Bhava is not based merely on scriptural stories and psychological insights. It has a strong philosophical basis as well, related to the difference between two fundamental principles, Purusha and Prakriti. In the Vedas, the word Purusha, or male, is sometimes used to denote the Supreme Being, Ishvara. And the word Prakriti, or nature, which is grammatically feminine, is used to denote the beautiful, lush fertility of the world, which is a distinctly feminine quality. Based on all this, followers of Gaudiya Vaishnavism consider Lord Krishna alone to be male. He is the only Purusha, since Lord Krishna is the one supreme, almighty being. By default, then, everyone else, including you and me, is considered to be female in gender. Chaitanya himself was said to worship Lord Krishna with the emotions or mood of Radha, the most dear of Lord Krishna's gopis. He was thought to be an incarnation of both Radha and Krishna together. His disciples wrote important Sanskrit texts in which the practice of Gopi Bhava was given a really solid logical and philosophical foundation. Later followers expanded on those texts and developed an elaborate system in which your guru determines the particular female spiritual identity that you are to assume, your siddha deha. They believe that your siddha deha actually exists eternally in the heavenly realm of Goloka Vrindavan, and that the goal of spiritual practice is to permanently assume the form of your siddha deha and dwell forever with Lord Krishna and his gopis in Goloka Vrindavan after you die. At the time of initiation, your guru reveals your gopi name and describes the features of your gopi identity, like your age, skin color, and the color of your dress. Then you have to meditate 8 times a day, mentally conceiving yourself with your gopi identity, your siddha deha. In each meditation, you have to visualize yourself in the sacred presence of Lord Krishna and his gopis, engaging in specific devotional activities according to the time of day. In addition to Hinduism, other religions also have practices in which male followers are instructed to adopt female devotional attitudes. A good example is the Christian practice called bridal mysticism. It originates in the Old Testament of the Bible, in the famous Song of Songs, where the prophet Solomon prays for God's sacred embrace, saying, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth." Such a bold expression for the Bible. After the life of Jesus, the church and its followers came to be represented as a bride, and Jesus Christ represented as her bridegroom. Their marriage in heaven and its consummation on a bed of clouds symbolically represents a state of mystical union, a state of oneness. So, to achieve that state, both male and female practitioners of bridal mysticism conceive of themselves as brides of Christ, in prayer, in worship, and in meditation. In ancient Greece, male priests sometimes adopted female personas. So did male shamans in some Aboriginal religions. They wore women's clothing and behaved in feminine manners to help break free from social norms and to transcend worldly limitations, including all the social norms associated with gender. Their radical or unconventional behavior is often called transgressive. Through their acts of transgression, gender-bending priests and shamans were believed to gain spiritual powers and to directly access realms that transcend our world. Coming back to Hinduism, throughout history, there have been many saints and sages whose devotional practices transgressed conventional gender norms. You can see this in their writings, from the prayers and poetry composed by Nammalvar in ancient Tamil Nadu, to those of Rabindranath Tagore, the Nobel Prize winner. Many of their works were written from a distinctly female perspective. They often used feminine pronouns and grammatical forms when referring to themselves. Perhaps the most famous example of a male spiritual figure who adopted a female devotional attitude is the 19th century Bengali saint Sri Ramakrishna. He said, "God can be served in different ways. Sometimes the lover of God says, 'I am your dancing girl.' He thinks of himself sometimes as a friend of God, and sometimes as God's handmaid. He looks on God sometimes as a child, as Yashoda did, and sometimes as husband or sweetheart, as did the gopis." When a male aspirant takes God to be his husband and constantly thinks of himself as a wife, that aspirant becomes capable of forgetting his male nature. He can then easily discard the idea, "I'm a wife," and reach the state which is beyond all moods. Sri Ramakrishna went so far as to dress himself as a woman to deepen his love for Lord Krishna. One of his disciples wrote, "When the master started to practice Madhurya Bhava, he was eager to wear women's clothing and ornaments." Wearing women's clothes like Sri Ramakrishna did is certainly not a mainstream Hindu devotional practice. But it's not that rare either. Here's another example. H.W.L. Punja was a popular teacher of a modern, non-dualistic spiritual teaching known as Neo-Advaita. He used to draw many followers, especially from Europe and the U.S. They fondly addressed him as Papaji until his death about 25 years ago. His teachings were mostly based on those of Ramana Maharshi. But unlike Ramana, Kunja was deeply devoted to Lord Krishna from his childhood onwards. He once told an amazing story about his life when he served in the army. Life in the army meant keeping up an outer front of normality and military sobriety. But at night, behind locked doors, I would transform myself into a Krishna gopi. I pretended I was Radha, the consort of Krishna, because I thought that if I imitated her in every way, Krishna would come and appear before me. I dressed myself in a sari, decorated my body with bangles and women's jewelry, and even put makeup on my face. I got into the bhava that I really was Radha, pining away for her divine lover. Okay, before we continue, it's really important to point out here that the practice of Gopi Bhava does not require men to dress or behave as women. In fact, very few practitioners actually do so. Yet, we find stories in the Padma Purana and elsewhere that describe how great kings, powerful warriors, and wise rishis, including Narada himself, were transformed into gopis for the sake of worshiping Lord Krishna. These stories suggest that taking on the appearance and emotions of a gopi is a powerful way to strengthen one's bhakti. In the next part, we'll discuss the relevance of practicing Gopi Bhava, not just for those who are deeply devoted to Lord Krishna, but for any spiritual seeker, including followers of the non-dual teachings of Advaita Vedanta. I'd like to show you how certain aspects of Gopi Bhava might actually be useful for followers of Vedanta. According to Advaita Vedanta, the main obstacles to enlightenment are avidya and adhyasa, ignorance and false identification. Due to avidya, you fail to recognize your true divine nature, your inner essence as pure consciousness, Atma. This particular kind of ignorance can be called self-non-recognition. And because of self-non-recognition, you then falsely identify yourself with your body and mind. You superimpose various attributes of your body and mind, like age and gender, on your true self, Atma, which is free from all such attributes. Like in a dark alley, if you fail to identify a piece of rope that's lying on the ground, you might falsely identify it, not just as a snake, but as a particular kind of snake, like a deadly cobra. In the same way, when you fail to recognize your true nature, you falsely identify yourself not just with your body, but with the age, appearance, and gender of your body. Yet your body is just a vessel made of flesh and bone. It's a vehicle, like your car, that you happen to occupy at the moment. If the car you drive was made by the Ford Motor Company, you would never say, "I am a Ford." But if the body you occupy happens to be male, you'll most likely say, "I am male." This same kind of false identification takes place with your mind. If you say, "I am very emotional," or "I am not very emotional," those traits actually belong to your mind, not to your true self, Atma. Now look at this. Everyone is born ignorant. So it's completely natural to falsely define yourself based on the traits of your body and mind, such as male or female, and so on. To become enlightened, you have to remove both ignorance and false identification, avidya and adhyasa. Ignorance gets removed when you discover your true nature as pure consciousness, Atma. Like in the alley, when you recognize that it's actually a rope laying on the ground. But with regard to false identification, it's a bit more complicated. In the dark alley, the snake you saw disappears the very moment you recognize it as a rope. On the other hand, your false identification as being male or female and so on does not immediately disappear. It lingers for a while. Except for a few rare spiritual prodigies, this kind of false identification can persist for days, for months, or even years. Why? Simply put, it's due to the habitual nature of the mind. Let me explain. In the alley, your mistake about the rope lasted only for a few moments. But your mistake about your true nature has continued throughout your entire life. As a result, false identification with your body and mind has become a well-established mental habit. By now, it's become so deeply ingrained in your thinking that to be young or old, or to be male or female, seems absolutely fundamental to who you are, instead of merely being features of the vehicle that you happen to occupy right now. According to neuroscience, false identification with your body and mind is deeply embedded not just in your mind, but even in your brain. It's been wired into the billions of synapses that interconnect all the neurons. So it's no surprise then that even after you discover yourself to be pure consciousness, which has no age or gender, your feeling of being young, old, male, or female still persists. That feeling clings to you like sticky glue. The ancient rishis didn't know a thing about neurons, but they certainly understood the habitual nature of the mind and how it can cling to a wrong notion even after the mistake was falsified. They called this condition viparita bhavana, which loosely means habitual wrong thinking. Here's an example. You already know that sunsets happen each evening because the Earth rotates on its axis once a day. The sun actually remains stationary in the sky while the horizon gradually moves upwards. But even though you understand all this, it still seems like the sun goes down because of your habitual wrong thinking. Now, suppose you watch the sunset each evening for 40 days in a row, and each time you imagine the sun remaining fixed in the sky while the horizon moves upwards. After you complete this exercise, you would no longer think that the sun goes down. Instead, you would experience the horizon moving upwards. This exercise works like an antidote to your habitual wrong thinking. It targets your persistent wrong notion that the sun goes down each evening. In the same way, your persistent wrong notions that you are young, old, male, or female can be targeted and removed by a different kind of exercise. An exercise that works like an antidote to the habitual false identification with your body and mind. That antidote is the practice of Nididhyasana, or Vedantic contemplation. It works the same way as the sunset exercise. By repeatedly contemplating your true nature, and by seeing again and again how attributes like age and gender belong to your body and mind and not to you, then gradually wrong notions that still persist in your thinking can be removed. Nididhyasana is an extremely important Vedantic practice that I've discussed in other videos. You can find links below. Now, let's consider how the Gaudiya Vaishnava practice of Gopi Bhava can be used as a form of Nididhyasana to address your habitual false identification with your body and mind. One of the most deeply rooted kinds of false identification is the notion that you are male or female. Even though you know that your true nature as pure consciousness has no gender, you still continue to identify yourself as a man or woman. So, how can this habitual wrong notion be removed? Well, a typical practitioner of Gopi Bhava meditates on his siddha deha, his spiritual identity, by imagining himself to be a gopi with Lord Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. He gradually learns to shift his identification to the gopi identity revealed to him by his guru. By performing this meditation 8 times a day, as his Vaishnava tradition prescribes, his ability to shift his identity in this way grows stronger and stronger with ongoing practice. Now, suppose you were to perform a similar meditation practice in which you shift your identification away from your own body and mind and identify instead with a great spiritual figure of your own choice. You might imagine yourself as an ancient rishi, worshiping the gods through an elaborate fire sacrifice. You might see yourself as a yogi, sitting in a cave high in the Himalayas, immersed in bliss. You might envision yourself as Mirabai, with tears running down her cheeks as she meditates on Lord Krishna. Or you might picture yourself as one of Lord Krishna's gopis, as the Gaudiya Vaishnavas do. As an experiment, I tried using this approach in daily meditation. Rather than using my power of concentration to focus on something like the sound Om, I used the power of my imagination instead. Imagination is used in many meditation techniques, like envisioning a small flame burning brightly in your heart, or feeling a sense of warmth filling your body. Techniques like these are usually based on imagery found in the scriptures. For example, the imagery I just mentioned comes from the Narayana Suktam, a sacred hymn from the Yajurveda. But to imagine myself with a different body and mind is another thing altogether. Fortunately, we all have powerful intellects, powerful emotions, and powerful imaginations. As children, we treasured the fictitious worlds we created in our minds. But now as adults, many people tend to devalue the power of imagination. But it's best to use all our faculties for the sake of spiritual growth. Not just our intellects, but our emotions and imaginations as well. In my experiment, I learned to disidentify from my own body and mind and identify instead with a different body and mind, a spiritual identity that I had chosen. Over a period of time, this practice strengthened my sense that the body and mind are just a vehicle. Each morning when I wake up, I get into that vehicle and steer it around all day. At night, when I go to sleep, I park that vehicle in a bed and leave it behind for a while. In my dreams, I seem to occupy vehicles of many kinds, some of which can actually fly. And in dreamless sleep, I remain as I am, with no vehicle whatsoever. Here's an even better metaphor. Waking up is like dressing in a set of clothes or putting on a costume for a drama. Your costume might be blue or pink in color. It might be quite plain, or it might be decorated with lace and frills. But if you wear that same costume all the time, day after day, from childhood onwards, you can't avoid getting identified with it. On the other hand, suppose you change your costume from time to time and wear a different one instead. You're getting it. Okay, here's one last observation before we conclude. Many people feel uncomfortable when they remove all their clothes and remain stark naked. It's also true that many followers of Advaita Vedanta find it difficult to detach or disidentify entirely from their bodies and minds and remain as pure consciousness, stripped completely naked of their bodies, their mental faculties, and their personalities. To enter the vast, empty abyss of formless awareness is indeed a big step. Perhaps the approach to meditation we've just discussed can be used as an intermediate step, a step in which you first associate yourself with a different body and mind to get used to the idea of changing costumes, so to speak. And then later, it will become much easier to detach from your body and mind altogether. To do so, you certainly don't have to practice Gopi Bhava in the elaborate manner used by traditional Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Nor is it necessary to conceive of yourself as having a different gender. You can simply use the power of your imagination to transport yourself into a different loka, another world, into a different body, with a different mind and personality. And it's even better if you choose to assume a spiritual identity that enables you to experience incredible depths of devotion, like the gopis did, and allows you to lose yourself in a blissful, non-dual state of divine union.